You're looking at the fridge. I'm the rookie. I may be large, but I'm no dumb cookie.
Hey! We're recording the podcast! Shut up!
Good morning to you, wherever you are, because it is for October 1st, 2024. So early. I crushed that one. All right. Hey, everybody. It's Bernie's first day of October. How you doing? That was my spooky intro.
Welcome to the official spooky season.
I don't think it played. I'll work on that, guys. Listen, we're all in this together. It's an artistic ship in motion. I'll do better. I promise I'll do better.
Be better, Bernie.
Speaking of which,
better.
I want to issue a rare Morning Somewhere apology. So yesterday, some people reached out to me because I was making fun of the American city Detroit for having no culture and being no fun. And the purpose of this podcast is not to make anyone feel bad about anything, okay? That's the whole thing. It's supposed to be a fun little morning show, and if I made you feel bad about living in Detroit, I would just like to say we're going to put in the link up today, we're going to post some resources of how you can move the fuck out of Detroit. I think challenging nationalism and patriotism are just like, I'm great because of where I live. Like, we lived in Austin. We made fun of it constantly. I felt like
all the time. But it's easy to punch up at Austin, right? I will say that I know Detroit has had its challenges.
Case in point, the Detroit Lions. Go ahead.
There's a team called the Detroit Lions.
Football team, American football team, Gridiron.
Gridiron. I love the name Gridiron. I really wish
it's
that
not
would catch
sticking,
on.
Ashley.
I know.
You're the only person.
It's like fetch, but I just wish it would because it's just such a fun name. Gridiron.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like it.
Really?
Nah, I don't like it. I like American football.
I think it's cooking.
Yeah, but listen, I'm in a weird situation here too. While we're talking briefly about sports, Texas Longhorns are number one.
Congratulations, I think.
They're currently number one in the NCAA college football polling series. The LA Dodgers led the MLB in wins, which means absolutely nothing. So both the teams that I follow are now number one in their league, in their sport.
Yeah, that's a really hard place to be, Bernie.
Could either be a really great year or it could be a super shitty.
What, because there's nowhere to go but down?
No. They're currently number one, but the season's not over, Ash.
Right. Nowhere to go but down. Yeah. They're at the top.
That is a good point. No, I think if they finish out, that's up. If they finish out and they're both number one, I'm setting up a run on the table, but emotionally, it's not going to work out that way.
Are you preemptively distancing yourself, like imagining all the ways this could go wrong and how you don't want to be hurt again?
I like to call it realism. That's what I like to call it. After watching the Dodgers set the division or the franchise record for most amount of wins and then immediately lose to the fucking Padres a couple years ago, immediately lose. It's just realism. That's all. Just realism.
Sure. Well,
also, Texas has to go through. They're going to play Georgia, who's now, I don't know what they're ranked, but they dropped because they lost to Alabama. Freaking Georgia had to play number 3, being number 2. They had to play number 3, and then a few weeks later play Texas at number 1. That's a tough. Well, I guess it would be September and October. That's a tough month, basically, though, for them.
Sure, that's going to affect the ratings, the pollings.
So now
Bernie,
Texas. October 19th, Texas will be playing Georgia. It was going to be number 1 versus number 2. Georgia is surely going to drop. But the crazy thing was, we will link this in the linked up if you want to see it. I saw the Alabama receiver, when they were fighting off a Georgia comeback, made one of the best plays I have ever seen made by a receiver at any level of gridiron. Actually, any level. It was an amazing play.
Can I ask you a question?
Look like a Madden character out there.
What's a receiver do?
They receive. That's it. That's their whole job.
They catch the ball. Do they then throw the ball once again?
They run out. What? Do you ever watch football?
No, I don't.
So they run.
I watch Super Bowl commercials.
They're the skinny guys out. That's why you never paid attention to them. They're like they're the waifs of the offense. They're out on the edges. I get the
feeling that like these waifs would also still be like 2 feet taller than me and like 3 times my weight
and pure muscle. Yeah. And they can also, they're like the Olympic sprinters of the football team. So they basically run out and they try to catch a pass. So their whole job is they run as fast as they can for about 30 seconds. And either they catch the ball and get laid out, or they get a touchdown, all the glory, or more typically, they walk back towards the line going, I was open, why didn't you throw to me? Complaining. That's more typical of what they do.
Where were you, man? Well, I was wide open.
So that's the receiver. So you have the wide receivers, which are like out on the very ends. And I guess technically you could classify what they call the tight end like a Gronk, classify that person as a receiver, but not really.
Why are all the sports positions sound like insane innuendos?
Why? What do you mean?
You tight end. What's the tight end do?
Your inside linebacker. So it's a little.
Can I tell you something?
Your fullback
that I prepared myself emotionally for, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah.
I started reading a series based on our listeners' recommendation. Dungeon Crawler Carl. This is a series by Matt Dinneman. It's in a subgenre of fantasy, I guess, that I've never really delved into. Have you ever heard of the subgenre lit RPG?
Lit RPG? No, what is that?
Well, first of all,
Let me try to work this out.
Okay,
Lit
yep.
RPG.
I can't wait for this.
It's a role-playing game, but it's all mostly social issues, and you process trauma. Is that what it is? I don't know. Lit RPG.
I think it probably translates less as lit and more as literary. It's short for literary RPG. So
I see. Okay.
You know how you like to, this is going back to NCAA, the game that you've been playing, or more accurately watching, right? You let the game play itself and then you're just there to experience it. Imagine something like that, except instead of playing an RPG or playing a game, you just read one.
Okay, that sounds totally normal to me because I have often described the explosion of tabletop role-playing games as content as basically let's play D&D. They're let's plays.
So this is let's
without
play
the whole annoying video layer.
Yeah, so this is let's play the book.
Okay.
Or as I've been experiencing it for the most part, an audiobook. By the way, the narrator for the audiobook is awesome. Highly recommend. But it's a genre that I'd never delved into before. Can highly recommend it. It has everything. It's like they literally level up and they have stats. And they
what in the book?
Yes, in the book, it's a full on like they get so basically end of Earth apocalypse. All the people that are outside at 2 a.m. get instantly transported into a dungeon, and then it's like a reality show. But it's like video game, except they are in it for real. But there's overlays and they have inventories and all these things, and they are supposed to try to survive as many levels of this dungeon as they can. And it is. I think there's 6 or 7 books out right now. I think it's intended to be a 10-book series. It's not something I knew how to process at first because it's so wildly different than a lot of the fantasy I read. But Bernie, I got to tell you, still not sure how I feel about it, and yet I'm on the 2nd book.
You're plowing ahead.
I am plowing through.
How many
this thing.
books in the series? How long are you going to torture yourself with this?
It's I think it's 6 or 7 at the moment, but it's intended to be a 10-book series.
I played a game. I don't know if you remember this or not. It was an independent game. Tharsis. Do you remember this?
I do remember this.
You're on a space station. It's people in the space station. You're trying to save a space station as it's being pounded, I think, by meteors, if memory serves correctly. Here's a little Tharsis soundtrack going on in the background here.
I recognize this. Do you know why I recognize this, Barney?
Because it always shows up on my Spotify plays.
For some reason, whenever your phone just decides to auto-play music, you go to play something that's not playing whatever you were playing before, it's decided, I'm playing something else now. It always plays Tharsis. Your phone loves Tharsis.
It is my espresso. It's forcing the algorithm on me. So Tharsis, what it is you would do these things like, and usually video games obfuscate the random number generation that they do in order to make events possible or not possible. This actually had dice. It left the dice in the game. And in this space station game, you would roll the dice. It wouldn't hide that behind a layer, like a graphical layer or anything. You were literally rolling dice.
That's amazing.
I love it.
And
it was fun.
Love that
Tharsis.
That including the dice as sort of like a gameplay element seems to be making a bit of a comeback. So in Dungeon Crawler Carl, just to set this up for you, the main character, his name is Carl. He ends up getting transported into this dungeon in his boxer shorts. He was outside in the middle of the night trying to get his cat out of a tree. And his cat, and then this basically the world apocalypses. These gates open down into the dungeon, and he's outside. It's a winter storm. He's freezing, so he runs into the dungeon with this cat, who quickly learns to talk. I don't think that's really spoiling anything. So he and his talking cat, him and his boxers, and his now talking cat are trying to explore this dungeon and get all this ridiculous gear. It's a very sort of fun experience, but also absolutely wild to be reading things you leveled up and now your strength is increased by 3.
Why don't just read the Bobaverse? I really just, if you can get past the stats and stuff of lit RPG, or Lit RPG. By the way, lit RPG, short for literary role-playing game, is a literary genre combining the conventions of computer RPGs with science fiction and fantasy novels.
Well, there you go.
I think like the Bobaverse, what you're talking about is like one step below that. Like they hide all of that stuff.
They hide the stat rolls.
Yeah, they hide all of that stuff a little bit in the background. They explain why scientifically everything goes right for them, essentially. Or wrong in some cases. And then that creates conflict and drama.
If they roll a nat 1.
Yeah, whereas you should all check out, though, on Steam, check out Tharsis. This is Half Age that is currently playing from the Tharsis official soundtrack.
I'm digging the incredibly chill music. I get the feeling the game itself is slightly more stressful than this particular chill music.
It's an actual game, though. It's not a lit RPG. This falls into the skibbity RTS. All right, let's talk about something real. What's going on in the world, Ash? What is the crack?
All right, couple things going on in the world. One, congratulations. Britain has become the first G7 nation to officially close down all of their coal power. So it was this week. This week they've closed the last coal power plant in the Britain, and so they've become the first G7 nation to do so. So congratulations to Britain today.
I'm dropping out the music. I will bring it back up whenever there's a sci-fi topic. I'll bring our music back. Speaking of coal power being turned off in all of Britain, congratulations, by the way, to Britain. That's an awesome milestone. It does show, by the way, Ashley, the impact that we can make on the environment quickly, because there was a recent study that came out that said the COVID lockdowns that we had in April and May of 2020, Ashley, they had a significant impact on the temperature of the moon.
The what?
The moon. So, we're back with our sci-fi music. So the study came out. We'll link in the linked up. It's a heavy paper, but essentially, I'm going to read this from the abstract that showed how the lockdowns in April and May of 2020, the strict COVID-19 global lockdown period, when compared to the values of the same period during the previous and subsequent years, since the terrestrial radiation has also showed a significant reduction during that time, the anomalous decrease observed in lunar surface temperatures is attributed to the COVID-19 global lockdown effect. Do you remember when we locked down, like, the environment started healing itself immediately?
I do remember. I remember a lot of pictures of LA without smog and things like that. And yes, there were a lot of temperatures that seemed to normalize incredibly quickly just because people weren't driving.
There were whales in Detroit, I think, if memory serves. They were like, there was like Seattle, like whales returned to the harbor and things like that. It was incredible how fast small reductions, or not small reductions, but concentrated efforts of reductions by humans immediately let the Earth begin to heal itself. And they're even showing from this paper, which I find to be fascinating, that what we were doing on Earth had an impact on the temperature on the moon.
That's weird to me. The moon part's weird to me, just because it seems
like
moon. It just seems like the moon would be so far away. I don't know how it would be affected, but that's incredible.
Well, you should read this paper, Effects of COVID-19 Global Lockdown on Our Moon by K. Durga Prasad.
All right, as soon as I finish my lit RPG, I'll read about the moon.
G. Ambly et al. From the monthly notices of the Royal Astronomical Society.
For Oxford Academic. And we'll go ahead and we'll put that in the link dump for anyone who needs a little bedtime reading.
We'll also link the Reddit comments so you can have somebody else smarter than you read
and summarize it for you. Also in the news, and this is an interesting one to discuss, is so there was a Netflix show that came out. It won a lot of awards, actually. Baby Reindeer.
I think about Tiger King, because they were talking about COVID-19 lockdowns.
Oh, yeah, that was a time.
Watching Tiger King, making sourdough bread, take me back, playing, what was the cute game you played on the Switch?
Oh, Animal Crossing.
Animal Crossing.
Yeah, that was very much a time, wasn't it? It was a vibe.
It was a time.
But Baby Reindeer, the series that's come out on Netflix and basically depicted a stalker relationship, has gone to court and
defamation lawsuit.
Yes, so Fiona Harvey, who is the inspiration for the character Martha in that show, is being allowed to proceed with her defamation lawsuit after a judge agreed the show suggested she was convicted for stalking creator Richard Gadd, that was inaccurate and that it was misleading because the show specifically says it's a true story. Not based on a true story, anything like that, not inspired by true events, which is how a lot of creators will get away with taking a lot of liberties. I remember there was a movie Perfect Storm, I think it was. And it was like inspired by true events. The only true event, the only thing people know is that a boat went out and there was a storm and the boat didn't come back.
Yep.
But so everything in that movie is a liberty. But they're able to say based on true events or based on a true story because boat went out.
Boat went out, storm came in. The storm part was real. The two storms coming together and making the perfect
Super storm.
But yeah, they couldn't fill in the rest of it. I think of another example, which is famously, and we're weirdly connected to this through friends, Fargo by the Coen brothers. They put, let me see if I can actually read the beginning. It says, the 1996 movie Fargo begins, "This is a true story. The events depicted in this film took place in Minnesota in 1987. At the request of the survivors, the names have been changed. Out of respect for the dead, the rest has been told exactly as it occurred." It's not at all a true story. Like, people have tried to tie Fargo to some real event. The Coen brothers have said, in paraphrasing here, in interviews, they've said, we just thought there's no rules against putting there's a true story. In fact, at the end of Fargo, it said no resemblance to any people living or dead or anything like that. The legal disclaimer, but you can say it's a true story and you don't have to prove that it's a true story, and it gets people more invested in the story, you know, when they're watching it, if they think it's real people.
Well, in this case, it actually was based on real people, but events were changed slightly or made more severe in their depiction in the show.
Also, the person's living and it's based on a real person who's alive today. That's a tough line for Netflix to walk.
Yeah, also in it is people were able to immediately find out who this character was based on because I believe they included tweets basically verbatim in the show. So if you just typed in like a bit of the tweet, it would bring up this Fiona Harvey's tweets. And so they were immediately able to find out who this Martha was. And
can I ask you a question?
Launch these harassment campaigns. Yes.
When you see a screenshot of a tweet or in like an article about a crime, do you immediately go look for the tweet?
I mean, I can. I don't usually because I'm far too lazy for that, but I could.
When anyone has like a viral tweet from like 2013, I will go look up that username to see like if they're still plugging away doing stuff, you know?
Sure. Just see how they're doing, checking in on them.
That's like one of the easiest things to do is find a tweet if you just post it verbatim. That's wild.
Look, I occasionally still see a lot of your tweets floating around in the wild. I remember there one specifically was one about, I believe, a Roomba attacking your broom.
Yeah.
That still occasionally goes around, and I just see it, and I think, this is a very weird, strange world that we live in.
I had a weird thing where our dermatologist had posted behind their desk my dermatology tweet of all the sustainable advice given to you by your dermatologist. Like, you have to wear a hat in the shower.
If someone mentions the sun to you, report them to the police.
Contact the authorities. It's all these things that dermatologists think you can do to avoid the sun, and you can't. Can I go a little bit down the rabbit hole with the Fargo thing?
Yeah, do it.
So there was a weird thing that happened. There was an urban legend that came about from Fargo putting that at the beginning of the movie. And that was that there was a Japanese woman who then saw that and through some kind of mistranslation or cultural difference, thought that Fargo was a documentary. And she
maybe something to do with the blurb at the beginning that said, "I'm a true story."
She thought it was literally a documentary, I think. And she saw the Steve Buscemi scene where he's burying the money and looking at the fence posts. And she set up this adventure to come to America. This is an urban legend. Went to go find the money, wandered into the Minnesota wilderness in the winter to find the money, and died out there. And we know about that because a friend of ours and a person I used to work with, the Zellner brothers, David and Nathan Zellner, they made a beautiful movie called Kumiko The Treasure Hunter, which is based on that urban legend.
We saw that at South by Southwest. It was a beautiful film.
Beautiful movie. I think David was nominated for an Independent Spirit Award for directing that movie. But it's tremendous. So they made a movie about that. And even when they were doing their marketing, it wasn't clear if it was based on a real person or not. So it's this wild, like, series of events where there's this statement made at the beginning of Fargo, which led to this urban legend, which led to this other incredible movie, which then you're not sure what's real and what's not. You know?
It's basically AI generated.
It's all scraping.
Counts of fingers.
So if we're looking at this, the baby reindeer thing, this is specifically though about someone who's still alive. And what's interesting to me about this is we saw this in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case as well. The defamation lawsuit has been cleared by a U.S. judge, so it can go forward with defamation. the U.S. seems to be a little bit more protective for people when it comes to defamation, whereas in the U.K., kind of maybe it's part of the tabloid culture or the if I'm just being honest culture in the U.K., they don't seem to worry about defamation as much. Like Johnny Depp lost his defamation cases in the UK.
I remember that because the
the
next day he got dropped from the Fantastic Beasts series. It was basically immediately after he lost his defamation suit in the UK, even though he then went on to win his suit in the US.
I wonder if it made his judgment in the US like greater, the actual monetary judgment that he received, because it was further damage what happened in the UK, and then he got dropped and everything like that.
Right, because it did have a monetary impact on his career that was more or less provable.
But he turned it around. He's not at home watching Tiger King and making sourdough bread. He's back on the movie sets.
I wonder how many people who picked up a COVID hobby like sourdough bread, how many people have kept with it? So I kind of want to hear from all of our listeners. Did you pick up a hobby during lockdown that you've stuck with? Because I really love that sourdough bread was such a specific thing, and it was such a craze that there were yeast shortages. Yeast shortages, Burnie.
I remember that, but that was related to people buying too much yeast?
Yeah, because people got really into bread making because, what else are you going to do?
I thought that was just like a supply chain thing like everything else.
Supply chain came a little bit later.
Yeah.
This was very early in lockdown. There just wasn't enough yeast to keep up with all the new bread bakers.
Hand sanitizer, gloves, yeast. That was the...
and toilet paper for some reason.
And for whatever reason, weird-ass toilet paper stuff. All right, Ash, anything else to talk about today, or who should we thank for our toilet paper and hand sanitizer budget today?
Today
that sounded super weird, by the way. Sorry if your name gets mentioned right.
I want to say a big thanks to Ethan Eppelman and Michael Burrows. Thank you both for sponsoring this episode of our show at patreon.com/morningsomewhere.
All right, well, that does it for us today, the first day of October. Very spooky, Ashley.
Spooky.
We will be back to talk to you tomorrow. We hope you will be here as well.
Bye, everybody.